Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to our yWhale community members and our audiences around the world. My name's Abe, and I'm the head of ecosystem at yWhales, and we're a community of senior executives who are either building, investing, or learning about the latest technologies shaping the way we do business and live. Today, I'm excited to have a discussion with Josh Otten, who is spearheading the disruption when it comes to media content and platforms. Now, Josh has deep experience in TV and film, and it's also very expansive. So, talent management, launching pilots on NBC, Fox. I think some people might know Joe Millionaire or Married by America. You've also led a lot of work on the financing side, raising double-digit millions for film production. You've done distribution. You've done acquisition strategies. You oversaw user experiences. You've done advertising. Josh, all of these dots in your past seem to have connected and led you to be an effective leader for where you are today, which is delivering high quality, original content and programs to audiences around the world through what your company is called Ronin Content Media. With that, Josh, I like to say it's a pleasure to have you on this conversation. How accurate was I with your background? And welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks, Abe. Yeah, it was pretty accurate. I mean, I've spent about 20 plus years, excuse me. I spent about 20 plus years in media. And within that sort of, those 2 decades, touched on technology, touched on brand, touched on content, touched on creators. Yeah. So I've got to watch media grow from what was really traditionally a network model, and this thing called cable started to make waves, and now where we are today, which is, we don't need to go decade by decade, but it's certainly transformative and different. So I've always sort of looked at what was ahead and sort of looked at what was going to lead and drive content creators, brands, distribution, monetization, all those things, and that's kind of yes, all those things have helped me to a culmination today of Ronin Media Networks and what we're looking to do.
I'm curious, was there a moment in time or someone that sort of shaped this direction and sort of shared, some insights as far as pay attention to the media space, or what gravitated towards you to that space?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, my first job was at the UTA mailroom back in the day, and making I think $425 a week when that was an acceptable salary. And I basically was fascinated with everyone was focused on television, or not focused, but talent and movies, and so I was focused on television because it was a business. It was very sort of structured. There was pilot season. You picked up this thing. You made this many episodes. It was a very sort of structured. Whereas entertainment, and especially the movie business, can feel almost chaotic. So I was drawn to that. And then early on, I just noticed immediate disruption on an annual basis when things started to evolve and change. So first it was cable, and then cable came in, and then as cable started growing, and then we saw the emergence of social media, and then we saw the emergence of technology. So there wasn't any one sort of like aha moment, although I'll get in a little bit later on, I'll tell you there was a couple of aha moments for us, but and for me personally, but it was just this understanding that there's a consistent evolution, and the best way to understand and not only participate in, but hopefully shape that is you have to really be looking ahead. And I to be candid, I noticed most people in media, that wasn't how they looked at things. They were in their insular bubble, and they were more focused on protecting business as usual, or making sure that business did not change or evolve too quickly and disrupt their own little ecosystem.
So my question here is, through the evolution, looking at it today, what's broken within that space?
Well, I think what you could see what's broken and as a positive and as a negative, right? So I think number one, content consolidation or media consolidation, and sort of this concept that there's now 7 companies, publicly traded companies, that own 95% of all media. For me, that's broken, right? That doesn't work very well. And it's either extreme. This idea that on the one extreme, you have Elon Musk, who is the sole arbiter in his ecosystem of what constitutes free speech or whatever. And it doesn't matter what your political view or even him as a person. I think having one individual completely in charge of that is probably not great for discourse and community. And on the flip side to that, you have these monolithic publicly traded companies that are just rolling up all these different entities and firing people and letting people go. And We're in the middle of a writer's strike right now that has no resolution in sight. And it's tough when you have one executive, at Time Warner who makes, basically almost one third in a year. He makes, one third of what the entire writers are asking as a community. 10,000 people who are saying, hey, we're asking for an extra $600 million. And you have one person who's making 250 million. So I think there's a lot that's broken. And I think it's it's an example of capitalism on Wall Street. It is what it is, right? You can't really fight
consolidation of power.
Yeah. And so that is, and you kind of have really interesting, cool, sort of meta shows like Succession that comment on these things and the irony that they're in the middle of an ecosystem like HBO, Time Warner, Discovery, which is now just called Max or whatever. It's interesting. So I look at that and I say, wow, that's broken, right? Is it broken? Is it broken if you're the executive or the investors? I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily say that either. It depends on what lens you're looking at determining. But as a content creator, as someone who works with content creators, someone who looks for distribution, those systems become impenetrable. They're not there to facilitate distribution. On the flip side, you have YouTube. You have social media. I can sit there and load up a video whenever I want and sort of, try and gather my own audience and sort of, so you have this democratization of content and distribution as well. But in the premium marketplace, premium content creators and that sort of stuff, it's definitely challenging. There's a lot of things that aren't working. Living wages even for writers right now is a challenging thing. That's why you're seeing the strike. So I look at it like, okay, so knowing all these challenges, where's the room to maneuver? What can we do? And so our position has been, if we could be at the center of brands, audiences, and content creators, that ecosystem and that connectivity, that is what television is. Television's always been ad supported, right? I mean, like it was, HBO was premium and subscription, and then Netflix and everything else. But for the most part, it's always been an ad supported vehicle. So I've always looked at it like, if you can figure out ways to connect the brands and the consumers and the creators, and do so in a way that works for all three parties, that's the sort of secret sauce that I'm looking for.
And it sounds like it merges exactly with what Ronin Content Services, bills himself as. So I think I pulled from the website is you guys are looking to help tell stories for intended audiences while maintaining the level of authenticity and creativity. Full stop. That's really what you're looking to deliver to everyone around the world.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, so there are great storytellers or great content creators, and they are looking for distribution. They're looking for eyeballs. And so if you go to a Netflix or something like that, again, we talked about it. It's this impenetrable, it's this ecosystem and network that's tough to pierce and get distribution through. On the flip side, YouTube, anyone can upload content there, but YouTube is geared towards the creator economy, and the creator economy isn't the premium content creator economy. The creator economy is, you might have a guy who's going to like order a pizza and throw like a pizza and an eggplant and make a smoothie out of it and drink in front of people. That guy might get 5 million views, and you might have, some amazing, short film with a bunch of really cool people on it that might only get 50,000. And also it's tough to monetize that content through there. So there's this massive gap between Netflix and YouTube, and the gap isn't because the quality isn't there on the content. It's the gap is because there's no distribution and reach and ways to monetize that content for the creators.
I assume you'd also throw in TikTok as well in this YouTube category also.
I don't. So for a couple of things. Yeah. The reason I don't is, again, TikTok is great for the creator economy. So what I look at is like you have creators on the one hand, and a creator, to define a creator, is someone that essentially is just making content with their own assets, with their own resources, could be a phone. And you have extreme levels of that. You have Mr. Beast, which could be $1 billion economy. And you have, whatever, and you have somebody on TikTok who's making, political shows. I think that those creators are needed. I think that the distribution of the content's amazing. I think each of those platforms serves different creators and different audiences. I think the idea that we're going to ban TikTok when Facebook's been doing everything TikTok's been doing times 10 is ludicrous to me. The concept that Facebook and Meta is now, has a $750 million judgment against it, where they've actively, stolen data and turned around and sold it and allowed places like Cambridge Analytica to do these things, pretended they didn't know and knew it was happening. All these things are, just as bad or as egregious,
Yeah.
right? So, anyways, again, those things aside, I think that content's great. I actually love TikTok as a platform. I think it's fun. They do a great job. Yeah, they do a great job of sort of giving you the content that you care about and looking at it.
Totally.
And you get content you will never see on Meta. You're not going to find behind the scenes deep political conversations on Instagram. It's just not happening. Maybe Joe Rogan or some comedians and podcasts, but for the most part, that's not what that platform is built for. So short form content, great. But long form content, storytelling, narrative storytelling, documentaries, long form news things. I think Vice was hoping to fill that gap, and I think there was a moment in time where Vice could have been that company. The fact that they're in the middle of bankruptcy right now, and I have thoughts on that. But I think the idea is that it's and news is no longer profitable. BuzzFeed, Vice, all these places. Is it because news isn't profitable? Is it because of how they are producing the news it isn't profitable? Is it because how they're distributing the news? There's so many layers to this. There's not one, boom, this is the reason, but it's dynamic in terms of dissecting what worked, what didn't work, and why.
What do you said you had thoughts on it, and maybe this is a great time to elaborate since we're just talking about it now, but where do you think that their big misses were?
Oh man, so many. I think timing. Vice was a victim of its own success and timing. I think that when they sort of peaked with the amount of money they were raising and how quickly they were scaling. Not everything's infinitely scalable. Not everything's going to make $1 trillion. And so when you raise a bunch of money and you're beholden to people who are demanding continuous growth, or an exit, give them an exit or keep growing. It's a tough sort of thing to do, which is why tech companies traditionally do better on multiples in media, because the thought is it scales better, right? So I think the amount of money they raised, how quickly they raised it, and then I think their timing. What I mean by timing is if they had started 3 years ago and they were coming to age now, they could have launched a streaming network overnight for several $1 million and had massive reach and penetration and distribution to every TV in America or globally. Right. The fact that they sort of launched their television strategy, I don't know if it was 5 years ago now or 6 years ago, however, it was a while ago, when the sort of streaming technology wasn't commoditized and it wasn't cheap and easy, meant they spent tens of millions of dollars on infrastructure. And they went after sort of an old school strategy, which was let's get distribution in the home on the actual TV through DirecTV or Comcast or Spectrum, where you would get what's called a household fee, basically a carriage fee. So ESPN, Fox, whether you watch it or not, you look at your bill, you're actively paying for that. That model is effectively dead, right? It's no longer, may not be dead for those that are grandfathered in, but it's not a viable strategy going forward. And so the problem was all of a sudden overnight, they're selling their advertising product to their advertisers saying, hey, we have Vice TV now, but they're only getting 40 or 50,000 views. Not great. Not great. But if you were getting 50,000 views for 8 hours a day in a streaming network, that's, I don't have my calculator. That's hundreds and hundreds of millions of impressions. And that's strong. If you were getting 50,000 views an episode on YouTube, that wouldn't really you couldn't pay your rent for that. So all these things, context matters, media matters, how you distribute. So again, there's a lot of nuances to it. I think Vice as a brand is still going to be around. I think bankruptcy is going to restructure it. I think they just have to get a lot of debt and do things differently. I think media has to be thought of differently. I think there are some really cool technologies, things that we're exploring that can be very scalable. And but yeah, again, I think they were a victim of capital expectations and timing.
So let's talk about new technologies, because Ronin TV has something that's called Alter TV, and I have used the product. I love it. It's very smooth. It's user friendly. It's great content that's on there.
Thanks.
Just spitting out some numbers. I believe you're in 60 million homes. There's about 2,500 hours of content on there. And you're essentially allowing a platform to talk about alternative subject matters, alternative medicine, documentaries, wellness seekers. Tell us some more about this.
Yeah, I would like to say that, because we're on Vice, it's a little Vice TV meets History Channel. Okay. We're focused on sort of, alternative transformative medicine. We just did a document. We did an original film and docuseries that premiered at South by Southwest with Deepak Chopra called Open Minds. That's on the platform right now.
Very
That did
cool.
really, really well. It's a great doc. We've done a lot of different things in spaces around healing and
Sure.
meditation
Yeah.
and wellness. We also do really fun unexplained mysteries and maybe conspiracy theories, stuff like that. So we're looking at it like Alter TV is your sort of home for content and conversations that you're not going to get in the mainstream. We do a blend of, it's not just news either, right? We do take a news coverage to it, but we really want
Right.
to connect with creators who are passionate about this. So our sort of spin is more, if there's a content creator who's passionate about transformative or plant medicine, let them tell that story and let us help distribute that. If there's a creator who's passionate about those things.
Do you think there's been a change in the audience demand for content like this? I mean, 20 years ago, would you think that you would have as many people as interested in this subject matter as you do today? I feel like these subject matters have grown in interest over the last few years. So I wonder if there's a change in the audience.
Absolutely. I think that you could look at it multiple ways, right? So there's a lot of media distrust for a great reason. We just talked about some of the issues of consolidation, fake news,
Sure.
these sort of things.
Right.
So again, what I look at it is what where Vice News, again, looking at what they did that was really good, that I think everyone gravitated, was they explored these subject matters with a viewpoint and a lens and an audience telling mechanism, working with younger reporters, that wasn't
Right.
how everyone else covered it. Fair and
Mm,
unbiased doesn't exist. Fair
right.
and unbiased is
Mm,
not a thing. So what we look to do is we look to say, hey, let's go direct to the creator. I want to go directly to someone that's passionate about it. Let them tell their story. Let us be a place for them to tell those stories and get direct syndication and be surrounded by other like-minded content. Whereas if you see this on YouTube, there's 50 other videos that Google is force
right.
feeding you based on algorithms and previous search records and
100%.
everything else. So,
Hmm.
so we also filter. This isn't UGC. Not anyone could just upload a video. So yes, I think there's always been an audience for this, on the one hand, but I think that there hasn't been a destination for these
Mm,
people to really go, and that's one of the things. And so for our focus, we like niches. We want to be creator focused or content creator focused, storyteller focused, somewhat niche focused, and then start to scale from there.
how do you find these content creators? How do you get in touch with them? How do you bring them into your platform, and how do you support them?
Yeah, so we have a chief content officer, Shelly Madison, who's our co-founder. So she helps
All right.
sort of source a lot of the content for somewhat for Altered, and also she's really focused on Veeam TV, which we'll get
Okay.
to. But yeah, we reach out to creators, they reach out to us. We have relationships with film libraries. We
Okay.
have so we kind of have different feeder systems that bring the content to us. We produce a lot of original content. We produced over 400 hours over the last 3 years of original content as
Wow.
well.
That's
We even
amazing.
we even partner with other networks. So we partnered with Reverie TV as a co-production partner for one of their first ever Pride-based films that they did, and they did some docuseries and stuff that we've been partners on with them, Banshee Ball, things like that. So we're both licensing and producing and co-producing content.
How are you expanding your reach to find more audience members?
That's a great question. So our strategy going forward, well, part of that demand has been to sort of foster this relationship with where we started Veeam. So Veeam
Okay.
TV was sort of born out of this need to say, okay, we built the technology, we built the
Got it.
distribution, we have the content. Now, how do we get audience? Because at the end of
Mm,
the
sure.
day, if you're at home watching television, you have a choice to watch something, even if you have Altered, installed there. We're still next to
Hmm.
Netflix. We're still next to HBO.
Yeah.
I still need to get you to
Totally.
come in and watch something that we have for 45 minutes to an hour and compete against multi-billion-dollar organizations.
Right.
So number one
Right.
is how do we attract audiences over there? So part of that strategy started to realize that attracting people in, if you don't have strong retention and you don't have continuous
Yeah.
content uploads and you don't have a feedback loop that lets you know what the audience likes and
Sure.
doesn't like and all these things,
Hmm.
it's a war of attrition. Your network can be a sieve, and so that's where we again started to really look at different strategies around technology. How can we use technology to increase retention, to create a stronger
Mm,
feedback loop between audiences and what we're doing? And then also content acquisition. How can we acquire or partner with content creators who are maybe creating content more consistently? So it's not just a really cool documentary that we have to go out there and get more of. And then finally, sort of how do we sort of incentivize both creators, brands, and audiences to spend more time with each other using our platform?
Interesting. Okay, so so you're almost building a network of the content creators on the back end as well.
Yeah. So what ended up happening was, I'll kind of flash forward. So we've been, we said, okay, we got the distribution, we know the monetization, we're connected with all the SSPs, which is how we deliver the ads. All those things are working. The numbers, the maths. So now what? So now we start spending money on driving audiences and then hoping they stick around. And what we did was, I became pretty fascinated. This was a couple of years ago now with Web3, and our first introduction to it was, we were approached by some people building NFTs that say, hey, can we market our NFT program or our NFT launch on your television network? I said, sure, but I need to learn more about who your audience is. And what I found out was, I found a highly dedicated, dedicated is the wrong word. I mean, it's like obsessed ecosystem of people where in the NFT community, right? Where they were spending hours on Discord and Twitter and Good Morning Friend and all this sort of stuff. And this is in the heyday of sort of this burgeoning technology and coming out of the pandemic and everything else. And so I was like, man, if we could get this audience to watch our content, I mean, are you kidding me? They're sharing, they're talking about it, and so I was like, we have to find some content that's been backed by this community, or create content to reach that community. And we spent some time, and it took us about 3 to 4 months. We found a series called Red Ape Family that was produced, I believe out of either, I don't know if it's Saudi Arabia or Dubai, but somewhere in the Middle East. And they had raised money by selling NFTs to produce this cartoon, based on Bored Ape Yacht Club. And so we negotiated with the team back and forth for a while, and finally we said, look, let us distribute this, because there's a pretty big gap between traditional media, content monetization, and Web3. And what I mean by the traditional media people, Web3 came and blew up so quickly, they didn't even have time to pivot or look at it. They played around with it, but even when they dabbled in it, they did it in sort of the more old school methodology, which is why I don't think it gained traction. And on the flip side, I think the Web3 community was so in their own bubble in terms of what worked for Web3, that they weren't really looking at how the rest of the world would operate per se, and sort of combine those things. And so what I mean to say is that, some of these cartoons and some of these things that were being built with investment from Web3 and NFT, which is amazing to see, sort of this, Indiegogo, GoFundMe campaign meets content, meets open marketplace, meets, shares and everything else. It's like, it's a dream. I think the technology is amazing. You have democratized content distribution and funding and all these things. What ended up happening was, all of the things that these little media ecosystems that launched within Web3 became solely incentivized to basically use it as a tool to sell their own token.
Yeah.
So that's just not going to work. And so all of these sort of places were like, we're democratizing content distribution, or we're syndicating this and but really, when you sort of peel back the layer, it's like, we're really here to sell this token to you. And the more you watch, the more this token, but none of the economics were tied to any real world economics. It wasn't like there was no real money other than the printing or distribution of this token and holding onto it and all these things. So I quickly saw like, man, that's just not going to last. I mean, that was my gut. It just, there's the audience is there and the excitement, but the economics, the math doesn't math. But if we can plug our ecosystem, which we are getting paid by advertisers, and we have distribution, and it's real world money. It's a $32 billion a year marketplace in connected television, and plug that in with this diehard audience, that could work. So we did some tests, and what we found was, if you had NFT based content and you brought that audience over and you gave them a place to watch it, and you supported it with ad revenue, and you shared that ad revenue with the NFT holders, your average revenue per user would go from, on the low end, $1, $2, or $3. That's us, right? That's in the independent streaming world. Then you can go to the next layer, like your NBC, your Peacocks and your Paramount Pluses, and now you're looking at, maybe $9, $10 CPM or average revenue per month, and then you go up to Netflix, and you're $11. Well, when you go to the NFT community and you explain to them, we're we're sharing in this revenue with you, the NFT owner. We're getting 60, 70, 80, 90, $100 average revenue per users because they were watching so much of it. So
No kidding.
yeah, it was fascinating. The challenge was it wasn't scalable because number one, um, the content might be 8 minutes or 10 minutes. It's heavy lift to produce that content. Number two, you have these little micro communities of 300 people who own this NFT or 500 people that own this NFT.
Right.
So, and so that's where we came up with our watch and earn it thing. Was like, well, we did these tests. We didn't produce the content or sell NFTs ourselves. We just distributed it, but we did educate the NFT holders on how they can share in the revenue. So we were like, hey, if we gave them another thing to watch after they watched the piece of content that they owned a piece of, and also let them participate in that, then they would keep watching. In fact, they'd probably keep the TV on, all day and watch it and tell their friends to watch it and do audience, content discovery around that. And then if we did one step further, there's our loop, there's our feedback loop. And then if we did one step further and we connected them via an app on the phone, and through that app, they could pre-order things or watch things or answer questions and get rewarded more and more for those actions, the feedback loop is even deepened. So that became sort of the thesis for our watch and earn. And then the idea was, as we started talking to Web3 communities, they're like, well, what about my token? And what about, I said, any token could be whatever. They're all here. Well, let's plug them all in. It's what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that the content's being monetized, so the creators are getting paid. The brands have multiple ways to connect to their audiences through TV ads and through the phone, so they're happy. And the user is participating in this ecosystem for the first time ever, where they're not on YouTube or anywhere else, and they're getting essentially a reward out of this, a tangible reward. Now you, Solana or Poly or Matic or whatever, it's your job to convince our audience that your product should be something they should redeem for. We just want to we'll facilitate that introduction, but that's where you have to go, and it's your job to market to them and tell them why your product's better. We can help you do that. And part of that was, if you saw, Coinbase has their learn and earn platform. I don't know if it's still active, but the idea is it's basically a performance marketing layer that allows cryptocurrencies to give away their product in exchange for people to educate themselves. So, but we never wanted to be tied to one ecosystem or one platform, because it's massively limiting in who we could reach. And in fact, the way I pitched it to a lot of our potential partners as, if you go our way, it's going to be way better for you in the long run, because we're going to incentivize people on other chains and platforms. And we're going to be incentivizing people who don't want anything to do with crypto, because they think in their mind they have to spend money to get involved. But if I can tell them that they're going to get this crypto and this coin or whatever you're giving away, or NFT, in exchange for just watching content they already like and love, and watching content from their favorite creators and everything else, it's a much different pitch or sell, right? So
yeah, go ahead.
No, so that was the thesis, and then we started to build around that, and kind of that's where we're and we could talk about Bean TV, but that's kind of what we spent most of last year doing, was exploring that and starting to get ready to build that.
Yeah, look, I think you talked about a really reasonable model that works here, and I think you're spot on saying that if there's truly just a financial incentive, these things are going to die. And I had a conversation recently with another founder, and we talked about how the gamification of engagement is always a better way to go, rather than the promise of rewards in some later date. I'm curious to understand what the user experience is to onboard people into the NFT ecosystem is. A lot of education takes place with our space, because there's a lot of people who don't really understand. They don't have wallets. So how have you been able to make that onboarding experience just as simple as possible?
Yeah, so we haven't launched it yet, but again, think of it like our onboarding experience is going to be no different than downloading Clash of Clans. And when you download Clash of Clans, you don't need a wallet, right? You don't need anything. You get your coins and your gems and all your things. They're all loaded up there. Or if you play a game on Steam and you have your achievements and your rewards. So there's no additional user steps. And in fact, we're never going to ask for a credit card. We're never going to ask directly for a wallet. All we're going to say is, hey, participate in our ecosystem by watching content, connecting with brands, answering quizzes, doing all these things. And on your dashboard, you're going to see every day you earn more points. And those points are going to be redeemed for things. Now, in the redemption process, that's when we'll introduce the concept of an NFT, or we can introduce the concept of what is Solana or what is a Bitcoin, because there's at this point, the user has already generated a significant cash value because on our back end, they've made, again, what do we talk about average revenue per user? Well, if we could take someone from $3 to $4 and take them to 20, and I take of that 20 a month and I'm giving them back 5, I'm still netting 15. It's benefiting the creator more who I share in the revenue, and it's benefiting us more. And then the person who's participating in this ecosystem has now got $5 worth of something themselves. What that thing is, what do they want to spend that $5 worth of something? That's up to the consumer. Our job is to give them a thriving marketplace of all kinds of choices. And it could be everything from a autographed Kevin Garnett bobblehead, one of one, all the way up into an Amex gift card or $5 worth of Solana. But the idea is once they start participating in that ecosystem, we're also going to give them more and more and more things to do besides just passively watch content, answer quizzes, talk to friends, rate content. So again, we're creating this feedback loop and this incentivization layer.
Beautiful. I love it. Before we jump on to Veeam TV, question for you. AI is growing incredibly fast in every form you can imagine. Are you guys thinking about AI, and how so within the user experience or the creation or any other method that I have not considered?
Yeah, AI is going to do to media and to brand advertising what Netflix did to Blockbuster. And it's going to radically transform it. On the back end, between Blockbuster and Netflix, you still had content that didn't radically change. You still had movies and television shows, but in terms of how consumers discovered, purchased, monetized, watched, all that stuff. So if you look at AI, what I believe we're going to see in the next 36 plus months is a couple things. On the user side, things like search engine result pages, where Google is essentially I'm Googling or I'm searching for information or something that I want. Right now, Google has 2 ways to sort of deliver that to you. They basically say, here's all these websites that have paid us money, so we're going to show them to you first. Doesn't matter whether it actually is
relevant or
good
not.
or not. They paid us, so we're giving this to you. And then here's our little search engine result page ranking of websites that have followed the rules of SEO and algorithmic blah, blah, blahs. And this is it. Now, do I want to have to start digging through these websites to get the recipe I want, or to, think about even just, something as what should be as simple as getting a flight to Boston.
Sure.
I want to leave. Well, even Google has that thing in there, but then there's this and that, and then finally you go to click, and then they drop you off at United, but Spirit's not included because they have their own thing, and it's still like you're like, man, I still need a travel agent for this half of this crap.
Yeah.
Whereas I've seen people now go use. I haven't used it myself, but I've seen people use AI tools, and they're literally plan me this. I want to leave at this time. I want to spend this much money. I want, and boop, there it is. Now.
Yeah.
That's radically transformative. And when you do that, you're never going back to the old way of doing things. So what does that do for content and brands and everything else that we operate in? If you're a brand and you've relied on, because almost every brand selling a commodity, whether it's tequila or water or power bars or weightlifting, I mean, you name it, cars, they're all versions of the same thing, right? Your tequila, you and I could have a preference, and we could, I like tequila, so I could talk about it probably for an hour, and the difference, the nuances, but for the most part, if they're, besides diving into the specifics of the product and the way it tastes and everything else, it's still a commodity, right? It's the liquid from an agave plant. So how are you marketing that, and how are you telling that story? It needs content, it needs influencers, it needs all these things. Well, a lot of the ways that people have been doing customer acquisition for years now is through pay-per-click and Google and search and all these other things. I think a lot of that's going to go away completely. And so that, where does that leave them? Well, now you have influencer marketing and social media, and that's also becoming challenging, right? Because everything's been so politicized by both sides, right? And
Totally.
I don't want to get into a both sides conversation, but the point is, um, the reality is like the people that I see screaming about cancel culture or woke or whatever are the ones who are canceling the most things these days. I mean, it's just like, it's like, and who wants to advertise on Twitter when it's just a mob scene of people screaming at each other and it's really negative and nasty. And so the minute I saw Elon Musk buy Twitter, I was like, this is going to be a disaster. This guy doesn't,
Yeah.
all Twitter is a giant advertising machine. That's it.
Mm.
It is a place for people to create content, to create impressions that's sold to advertisers. That this idea that it's some bastion of democracy or it's the free market of ideas, none of that matters. It's an ad machine. So stop. If you don't understand advertising, you shouldn't own or run a social media network.
Mm.
End stop. And so none of it was never a technology problem. It was an advertising problem, it was a retention problem, it was a content creation problem. The tech and the engineers weren't the reason Twitter kind of plateaued, right? That's the same reason TikTok is exploding because of how it's allowing people to connect in the content. My point, the reason I bring
Right.
that up, besides ranting about it, is brands now have less choice on search. It's less effective. It's more expensive. They're not big brands are staying away from Twitter. You can do your own research, but it's true. We're talking billions of dollars in lost ad revenue because no one wants to see their brand message next to hate speech from anyone.
So where are they going?
A great question. Where are they going to go? So Facebook has seen a pretty big resurgence. Instagram's still that safe space of watches and girls in bikinis and cars and whatever sort of the algorithm you want. I think Facebook in the long term is still going to have challenges, but for now they're retreating there, and they're in television, they're in streaming, they're in CTV because what's the best way to tell a brand story is by a nice, clean 15, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60-second commercial that you created that tells your story that could reach millions of people with the click of a button. And now with streaming, I can reach you in your home. I can reach you in Marina Del Rey. I can reach you where I want to reach you. You actually have data sets that 10 years ago you didn't have. When you bought a TV ad, you relied on some dude who worked for the TV network and Nielsen to convince you that you were reaching the audience you wanted to reach. Now I can buy a data set the same way that you would advertise on Google, and I'm delivering video, and it's not skippable, et cetera. So what my long-winded way of saying, I think that AI as part of this general trend is going to help media in the long term because media is going to have to continue to figure out how to tell brand stories and create narratives and to directly reach their audiences. Influencers are only a piece of that. Social media is becoming a little bit less safe. I think AI with deep fakes and the ability to sort of again, think about how AI is going to commoditize content creation. You're already seeing it with Stable Diffusion, all this other stuff. It's pretty cool if you played around with it. It's neat. I can sit there and say this and that, and I love it for decks and all kinds of other things, right? But it opens up a whole can of worms. Is it copyrightable? Well, it isn't, unless you yourself as an individual transform the content that was created by AI into something else. But now you have places like Italy saying, yeah, but where's the data integrity? Did you get data consent to train your models? Where's that data that you're scraping to do? So again, it's way too deep to answer today. What I look at in AI is two opportunities. Number one is I believe it's going to allow places like us where we filter our content, we create unique communities of people that that isn't about screaming at each other. It's not UGC, so we need to control what comes in on the platform and what's seen. We have the ability to connect brands to consumers in multiple layers, right? Not just streaming ads, but also down the road through mobile apps, et cetera. We're going to be a really nice, safe space for brands, and brands can tell their own stories in our networks. We're now working with brands directly, like our Deepak Chopra was branded content, believe it or not. It's a 6-part branded content with a brand out of Canada that's a publicly traded company, and it premiered at South by Southwest, and it's got a lot of traction, and it was really popular for them, and it's a great piece of content for our audience. So I think that's going to be interesting, and then I think generative content is going to be interesting. It's going to be weird to see how it works, but the ability for us to take some of our content overnight, make it available in Portuguese and Spanish and other things and make it sound the same. I think that's going to be really cool as well.
You mentioned a lot about the use and the richness of data that's available. Now, one of Web3's principles is that you own your own data and you give it out to whoever you want, but there's also an incentive when you do lend that out. Let's say 5 years, 7 years, 10 years from now, that actually takes off. how do you think advertisers are going to have to adjust or adapt to the fact that information that is as rich as it is today is not going to be as easily accessible in the longer term?
Yeah, I think again, we agree with that philosophy. I think that, so what we do on data ownership, for instance, is we hold some of the basic data on the back end. We just don't sell it
Okay.
to brands. So what do I mean by that? I mean to sit there and say,
So you own it essentially.
well, we don't own it. We don't own it either. What we do is we say, brand, I guarantee you that the person if you want someone in Marina Del Rey, who's
Mm-hmm.
probably this old, who lives in this area, who's watching on a
Mm-hmm.
Samsung TV device, who's watching this type of content, that if you, all these check boxes, right?
Sure.
I can guarantee you I will deliver that content to that person. I'm not going to tell you who that person is. I'm not going to give you that data that you're delivering the ad against.
You try to
And
shield.
I shield it. But we've our ad distribution engine legally will not deliver an ad unless it meets the requirements that the advertiser set. So it's like, hey, we found this person. You deliver the ad. Now that person sees it, and that's the initial layer we present. All this data that we just served against, you don't get access to. Unlike,
Now,
go ahead.
now, did that user voluntarily give you that information? And is there an incentive for them to give that to you, or are you just using it because you are aware of it?
The minute that you use Roku, Apple TV, Samsung, TCL,
Oh, I know. They
Vizio,
know everything.
they necessarily know everything, but you have to, what they're going to do is if you want to use their service, especially their free service, they get to at least know what device you're using, where you're
Right.
watching
Sure.
it. So there's some basics. So
Yeah.
yes, is the users accepting those terms of service way before they even touch our ecosystem. That's just part of
Yeah.
signing up for a lot of these things. That being
Right.
said, what we want to do is we want to go a step further and say, hey, we're here to deepen that connection. So brand X, Abe is willing to connect with you and share certain information if you do a couple things. You promise not to resell it. You promise to reward him or incentivize to do this thing, and you sort of treat it with data integrity. And we want to facilitate that, because if I come back to you and I say, hey,
Got it.
by the way, we're going to give you a $5 Amex card if you give this person your email address and 10 other things. It's up to you. You could check
Yeah.
mark that
Yeah.
box if you want to, or you don't have to.
Got it. Let's shift over to Veeam TV. Now, this is a joint venture that you're doing with Kevin Garnett, and I understand that this is a platform that's really focused on delivering diversity and inclusion related content. So it's also focused on culture. It's all focused on education, lifestyle. Your target reaches 85 million users, I understand. Can you talk to us a little bit about the idea and the inspiration behind this, and sort of, Kevin Garnett's just a legend, right? So how did that story sort of come together?
Yeah, so I know people. So Kevin has a really thriving media and content business. So he's got a show called Certified that's on Showtime with Paramount Plus. He's got a deal with Village Roadshow, a first look deal with Village Roadshow,
All right.
and he's got a deal with Tubi that just bought two movies of theirs, Cinnamon and Murder Inc.
Nice.
Cinema's premiering in Tribeca. So he's got this really strong, thriving media business already. And his partners at one point were watching some of our content on Alter TV, and they were watching a docuseries about some cannabis farms. And in the middle of it, they saw a Burger King ad, and they're like, "What?" They kind of freaked out. So they called me and said, "Hey, how are you getting these mainstream advertisers to advertise on this content that's exploring topics that they thought were not brand friendly?" And I was like, "Well, that's our model. That's what we do." So we just sat down, and it was actually February, a year ago, February, not this February, but the last one, February 2022. And we sat down, and I said, "Look, I want to understand your existing, Kevin and Content Cartel, and he's got a great partner, Mike and Bo, and kind of what you guys are doing." And they've produced amazing documentaries, Obama documentary, Allen Iverson, Frio Eric Ross, Anything is Possible with, Kevin on Showtime, all these great things. And what I realized was they've done an amazing job of, producing great content, having distribution, having the media partnerships, but they didn't have their own distribution. And I was like, you're missing this crucial link where you're still reliant on the showtimes, remember we started the
Sure.
conversation with these
Yeah.
vertically
Right.
integrated consolidation.
Hmm.
You're reliant on them saying yes or no. You're reliant on them owning a piece of your content or even ultimately owning the audience. Even if you own
Yeah.
a piece of the IP, that's still not your audience. They're the distributors.
Right.
And so
Right.
the idea was, why don't we build a network and an ecosystem that not only benefits and facilitates distribution and monetization of content that you guys are producing, but all your other partners. And, since then, we're also working with Matt Barnes. So Matt's launching something called Hybrid TV in a month or two. And we're going to be ecosystem partners with them. There's, we've had some really great meetings, talking with everyone from Paul Pierce to Rajan Rondo. So there's this
Nice.
big energy and desire. And I think that today's entrepreneurs and athletes are entrepreneurs. 100%. I mean, they are an influencer and they are an athlete and they are an entrepreneur and they are a business in and of themselves
Very savvy. Very
and very
savvy for sure.
savvy. And so for
Hmm.
them, especially once they leave the league, and they're looking for what to do, these are men and women in their prime, right? I mean, they're
Right.
mid 30s, and
Right.
they're
Yeah.
a lot of times have a lot of success and wealth, but they're also leaving this very structured ecosystem, and so they're interested in media to storytell, and it's confusing because they come into it and there's a lot of paths you can take. You're like, do I go do a stint on TNT, or do I go try and do my sort of, am I a color commentary person? Am I going to position myself as the person that is the brains and can dissect why
Right.
this play happens this way, or am I the person that's going to make fun of and clown this person and be more, and because you have all these players, you have
Right. Sure.
Kenny Smith and Charles Barkley, and then even within those ecosystems, there's layers to it, right? There's
Hmm.
a pecking order, and so we are saying to these great players and athletes, and beyond athletes, by the way, just other content creators, hey, you guys at the end of the day need places to tell stories, ways to monetize your content, distribute. Let us be a partner with you and show you that we're going to help you make more money, give you more brand freedom, personal
Right.
freedom, content creation freedom, and sort
Awesome.
of be partners with you.
Josh, that sounds really fantastic. And I know that Veeam TV is going to be a product launching very soon. So why don't you elaborate a little bit more about the journey to get here? What people can expect within the next few months?
Yeah, so we're in the middle of sort of reaching out to specific content creators, some
Hmm.
library partners. We're in the process of building out the technology, advertisers. There's a lot of pieces that are moving pieces. What we're excited about is a lot of our agency partners that are really looking for ways to go back to the brands they work with and say, hey, we've got new ways to tell your story. We have new
Cool.
ways to connect you to your consumers. And we want to be a part of that. And we can, again, through the relationships that we have and the skill sets that we have, if you think about content distribution monetization, there's multiple. It's heavy lifting to produce original content. It's heavy
Right.
lifting to understand how to monetize it. It's heavy lifting
Totally.
to figure out how to connect with brands. So all these pieces, it definitely takes an entire team. And to that end, we have, I work with Shelly Madison. She's amazing. She's a great filmmaker, producer, understands content acquisition and licensing. Jason Rood is my other co-founder. Jason's a great partner. He really understands, he's our chief revenue officer. So he's worked in media sales, understands all that, that world, how to communicate. He's also very on top of AI, which is exciting. He's sort of every day sending me
That's
TikToks and
necessary.
things to, yeah, let's
Necessary.
integrate this. And it's a team, and the Content Cartel team. These guys are just some of the best premier storytellers in the world.
Yeah. Where do you see Veeam TV and perhaps Alter TV going probably about a year from now, maybe 2 years from now?
Yeah, I mean, where I see, I see us as an entity, Ronin Media Networks,
Sure.
where we have Altered, we have Veeam, we're going to have a partnership with Hybrid, and there's two or three other verticals that we're exploring right now,
Okay.
where either we directly own and operate, we manage, or we have production and distribution and sort of AOR record relationships with, agency of record
Got it.
relationships with.
Sure.
And so we have this nice, sort of company that can go out and say, hey, brands, we have multiple different audience demographics and psychographics to serve your content to. We
Right.
have multiple brand storytelling production companies that can produce original content. We have access to athletes and influencers that you can, use to communicate on your behalf. And we have these consumers and audiences that we have cultivated a relationship around transparency and incentivization and sharing in revenue and all the other things. And so I think we're going to be a powerful player and disruptive. I think ultimately we're going to be disruptive because I believe if it's not just building a better mousetrap, it's just building something entirely different. Just like we started the conversation on AI around, once you use
Right.
AI to get certain data, it's almost impossible to go back to the way it was done. Well,
Yeah,
once you
totally.
go into our ecosystem, we start to really connect you to these creators and incentivize you in a new way. It's going to be very difficult to now go into another environment and say, well, how come I'm not getting these things here?
Right.
So that's what we're excited about.
That's fantastic. And I think one of the questions I have for you is regarding Web3 personally and professionally as well. What does Web3 technologies mean to you?
I think, for me, look, I love the concept of Web3. I love the idea that all these transactions are stored on the blockchain. I love this idea of
Hmm.
the true democratization of, there's the sort of no BS connection between, it can be a content creator or someone that's making an NFT or one, and directly to their
Right.
audience, right?
Right.
There's no gatekeepers. There's no,
Yep.
so that's really exciting. I think what it means to me is that I think it got caught up in its own hype, and I
Hmm.
think it lost a little bit. It lost the sort of the where this technology is most valuable and how it can be most used. I think the future of where I think Web3 is going to be absolutely scalable and accelerate and grow is a couple things. One is in games. It's a no brainer. I mean, you already
Definitely.
have multi-billion-dollar marketplace. I mean, I remember the story back in the day of like whether it was Eve or World of Warcraft, where people would be going on eBay to sell some, I don't know, some axe that they grinded 10 hours to get, and then they would
Yep.
sell it, and then you would have some intermediary who would meet you in game and you'd hand it to
Yep.
them, and
Yep.
then
Uh-huh.
I'm like, these people are going to these lengths to just sell a digital asset. How the
Totally.
hell is Blizzard not creating an overnight marketplace to facilitate these transactions? Just blew my mind.
Yeah.
So the
Yeah.
ability to now have an on-chain act that I can value and sell directly without anyone stealing it, and then having the game facilitate that, it's a no-brainer. Do you
Totally
need Web
certified.
three to do you need Web3 to do that? I mean, you could do that within a game ecosystem, probably create marketplace without it. But I think what's cool
Mm.
about Web3 and what's the difference is, you open up the marketplace activity, you open it up to a different user base. I think the second
Yep.
thing that's going to be important as it relates to AI is, what I'm not saying I call it like I'm coining the phrase, but I may have heard it or not, I don't know, but proof of personhood, proof of
Mm.
reality.
Mm.
How do I know I'm talking to a real person right now? How do you know I'm a
Yeah.
real person, right?
Right.
We're exploring some interesting technologies around digital content creation, and so how are we sure that the things that we're seeing are real? And if you can use a way to connect blockchain into whether it's the media itself or sort
Right.
of diving into it, you can only create one of those things. And so if
Right.
I sort of attach this to this, and the person that has the ability to attach it there's some
Hmm.
trust there or some sort of proof of something there, then there's a quick and easy way I could click a button, pops up. Yeah, this is a proof of personhood chain, or this is, so I think that blockchain is going to have a viable future in that as well, which is authenticity and traceability. I don't, yeah. Anyways, that's
Outside of media, I think you're spot on. Outside of media, what industry do you think will benefit tremendously from Web3 technology, from directly from the perspective that you have learned in this experience, in your own experience?
so outside of media and games, would you say would Web3? I mean, look, I think there's still going to be a really vibrant, well, let's just call it a metaverse or a digital universe. I think
Okay.
I think Meta, again, just like Vice, was 5 or 10 years too early.
Mm.
I think Apple and AR and all these other things. I think as we start to get in, as digital becomes more integrated into our life on a day-to-day basis, as these glasses, you don't require clunky things and look goofy, and they actually have AR built into this thin modular that you can't even tell. And I'm doing that sort of stuff. at that point, blockchain becomes again this sort of this proof of or sort of
Yeah.
validation of things, right? Immutable, et cetera. So
Yeah.
I think as we enter into a more digital world over time, I think blockchain's power becomes more validated. I think as coins or as crypto, that's just not my thing. It doesn't mean
Mhm.
it's valid or not. It just means
Sure.
I have a hard time understanding the value of something just predicated on scarcity or the fact of how hard it is to create it.
Fair.
Not to say that isn't valid or who cares what I think. I'm just saying for me on a day-to-day basis, I look when it comes to transactions, buying or selling or using something, ease of
Right.
transaction is going to outweigh, anything more than
Absolutely.
that. And so in the
Absolutely.
future, when these transactions become easier to integrate and use and it's all on one wallet, sure, I think you'll start to see a bigger spike on that as well. But I think,
Well,
yeah, anyway.
I was gonna say, June is coming up, and Apple is supposed to be announcing their hardware to AR VR, I believe. So we shall see, and see maybe that's maybe this will be the Gen 1 of the iPod moment for Tim Cook.
I think so. I mean, I remember I 2007, I bought the first iPhone. I was in Seattle
Yeah.
and I lined up and I got the thing and I don't think it did anything, but I think it sent, I think it had a Safari, it made phone calls, it sent texts and I think there was email.
Yeah.
There's certainly not, and that was it. Maybe there was
Yeah.
some notepads or something, but
Yeah.
the leap from that to what I was using before that, which was some like weird Windows with a stylus thing that barely had connectivity, was
Yeah.
pretty awesome.
Yeah. So let me ask, as an entrepreneur like yourself, someone who's been a leader, what do you find was the most critical skill set to that contributes to the success that you've had thus far?
Oh man, I think there's a couple of things. One is I know you asked for one, so let me answer the question, then if I have more time, I'll dive. But communication, it's just being able to be
Mm,
an effective communicator. An effective communicator means you have to listen to people.
yeah.
So I think we are in this cult of personality CEO entrepreneur worship thing going on
Mm,
where, everyone can be an influencer, everyone can stand in front of Lamborghinis and flash money and have a LinkedIn profile. And the reality is, it is so much work to build a company that is successful.
mm,
And the CEO is absolutely important from a vision standpoint and the responsibility, but the people that are part of that team are integral to any success. So I think communication is important, but I think a team, like just a great team, it's you can't, I just think it's like it's nice and easy to a certain degree to put like Elon or whoever up there on a pedestal to say this person or this person is the sole thing, and they have a lot of
yeah.
power and a lot, but it's like man, there's 1,000 people there that are responsible for all these
Yeah.
things, and so I think team, I think communication. And I think to be an effective leader, you better know how to do a lot of things. You can't manage someone if you don't know how to do their job. That's the
Sure.
reality. And so in my life, I've produced content, I've developed content, I've owned a small agency, I ran social media campaigns, I've built that, I've done all the things, and none of them that well. I've done them poorly enough to realize I have to work with people that can do those things
And
better
hire
than me
somebody who's,
and hire
yeah.
someone.
Okay.
But at least I can manage them to a certain degree, or at least know where they're coming from, or understand the challenges, or sort of the things. And so I think that's the other thing, is that there's this immediate need for immediate success, or I need to be rich now, or I want to be successful
Yeah.
today.
Totally.
And
Hmm.
you can't discount just going through ups and downs and doing the things and learning the things and really sort of anyway. So those are sort of, I would say, my number one. And then and it really, all
That's great.
honestly, it's always timing. Timing's everything. Timing and luck, whatever you want to call it, luck or timing. If you time something the right time
Hmm.
and you have the right idea and you have the right team, it's like all the boxes and the right funding and the right everything has to
Yeah.
be checked off perfectly to be
Yeah.
successful.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. All right. I have one last question before we close out.
Awesome.
The question I have for you is, in all of your professional years, even back when you were an intern, in the mailroom, I believe you mentioned,
Yeah.
what was your most memorable assignment?
I think, I'll go back to the mailroom because it's
All
funny.
right.
Yeah, sure. Why not?
First one.
My most memorable assignment was, it was my first day, and I was like, and you're in a, I'll date myself. This is 2000, so 23 years ago. So still in a very physical, analog style world. And you just
All
literally,
right.
you just got it and you put stuff in the thing and you shuffled it and you dropped off scripts and stuff. And so it was pretty overwhelming. And it was very, it was very intimidating, and it was this sort of I don't know if you remember Boiler Room or
Yeah, sure.
Wolf of Wall Street, but that was a
Mm-hmm.
cultivated vibe back then. I mean, this is unfortunately back in the days of, the heydays and the Me Too's and all this sort of ugliness that was going on behind the scenes. And that vibe was pervasive. It was purposefully intimidating. I think they saw it back in the day. When I say they, just the people in power structures, as calling the weak, right? And it was
Right.
also how they were brought into the ecosystem. But all that being said, I was delivering this stuff, and I remember going around the corner, and this poor assistant's getting screamed at and having pencils thrown at
Oh
their head, and
gosh.
a very, very like
Oh
over the
man.
top, stuff that would, generate multiple lawsuits these days. And I get to the thing, and I'm like, oh God, is this what I've signed up for? And the agent in there is like, motioning at me, come in here, and he sits me down, and he's in the middle of running a phone call and screaming at his assistant. Basically says, I'm like, what do you want? He's like, I need you to fix my lighter for me because it's broken and no one can fix it. So I'm like, what is gonna, what do I,
What the
it's like,
hell?
yeah, because you asked for a assignment, right? So I'm like, what am I supposed to do with this lighter? I don't know what it. And meanwhile, the person who ran the mailroom is freaking out because I have a schedule, right? I have to be back down, and I'm supposed to be making rounds, and you got to make 10 rounds in an hour or whatever.
Right.
Where is he? And he's in this dude's office, and what's going on? So finally, I come down there and say, look, man, I have to fix this lighter, or this guy's going to scream at me. And he's like, there's this weird thing. And so finally, I say, let's fix it. But all I needed was a flint. So I went down the street and I bought a flint and I installed it and I brought it back to him and I fixed his lighter. But from that moment on, it was kind of like, oh, he's the dude that fixed so and so's lighter. And and then from there I went on I think I got on a desk. I think I got on my first desk within like 6 weeks, whereas like, it could take,
Wow.
and I was on a desk that was a track to be a junior agent, meaning, if there's 100 people and there's 100 people with 100 assistants, some of them have two assistants, you're only promoting half a dozen people a year from an assistant to a junior agent. So anyway, that was it was fun. It was intimidating. It was sort of my first, and also made me realize I wanted nothing to do with being an agent. I lasted 9 months and I was like, this is not the ecosystem for me.
Wow.
That was my assignment, I guess.
That sounds like a very memorable,
Yeah.
unforgettable
Yeah.
experience. And I guess the takeaway lesson here is if your boss needs a lighter, learn how to fix the
Yeah.
damn thing.
It fix yeah. Well, it's about anticipating needs, right? And trying to
Yeah,
be ahead of
anticipating
time. Yeah.
needs.
Yeah.
There you go. Josh, this was really wonderful. I'm delighted to have you on our podcast today. We
Thank
dove
you,
a
Abe.
lot into media.
Yeah.
I think our audience really learned a lot from this conversation. I'm excited that you were able to afford us the time.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on. I hope it was memorable and entertaining. So thank you.
Listen, I'm going to keep using your platform. I think it's
Thank you.
fantastic, and I'm
Thanks.
really excited to see Beam TV as well. It's really
Thanks, Abe.
exciting.
Awesome, brother. Thank
All
you.
right, thanks everybody. Take care.